Welcome to this tutorial. So this tutorial is collective sense making via social sensors. And this tutorial will be offered by Dr. Yuheng Hu, me, and Dr. Jiebo. And my name is Yuheng. I'm an assistant professor from School of Information Science from University of Pittsburgh. So it's Saturday early morning, so I'm delighted to see a lot of audience already. Okay, so first I'll give a bit overview of my research. I'm a computer scientist by training, and I'm now a computational social scientist. The research that my group and I have been doing is in the area of data analytics. And we are focusing on network science and computational social science. And another research that we have been working on is in data visualization. And specifically, I'm interested in understanding human and social dynamics from big data, such as cell phone data, social media data, and news media and blog media. And a lot of our work is in developing computational approaches for mining and visualizing data that have following properties: large scale, time varying, heterogeneous, and semi-structured data. And my research spans on three directions: social dynamics using social media and social network data, crisis response, including collective sense making and risk perception following disaster, and data visualization. And I specifically focus on visual analytics. Here is today's outline. This tutorial will have two parts. Part one will be offered by me and Yuheng Hu. And this part is collective sense making using social media. And this part will be 2 hours. And the second part will be offered by Professor Jiebo, and he will be talking sensing from social multimedia. So in the first part, I will first give introduction and cover concepts and applications. So I will talk about what is collective sense making, why it matters, and overview the research themes and applications. And then next, Yuheng will introduce the methods and the recent development, including the technique and research challenge. And he will be focusing on event understanding and event prediction using social media. So what is collective sense making? First, what is sense making? Simply put, it's the process by which people give meaning to experience. So the experience must be new. So we have to make sense of the new experience. And a more specific definition says sense making is a thinking process that uses retrospective accounts. So you think retrospectively to explain the surprise. So this surprise is about the new experience given by the exogenous event. And these are the major contributors to the sense-making theories. It starts from early 70s. And these pioneers have developed sense-making theories and used sense-making theories in many areas, including cognitive psychology, information science, especially HCI domain, and organizational studies and sociology. And they have established different perspectives on sense making. For example, the representation of meaning could be internal in our mind, or external, like using artifacts from the environment. And the outcome of sense making can be interpreted as individual understanding of the new experience or a collective shared understanding of the new experience. And here we focus on collective sense-making. So why collective sense-making? Collective sense-making has two key elements. It is communicative because it involves individuals comparing their perceptions and understanding to achieve a shared or generally acceptable explanation. And it is iterative because it occurs and recurs in repeated cycles. Therefore, collective sense-making is a collective process where early explanation within a community keep influencing its members' a shared understanding about new experience. So why social media could be useful in understanding collective sense-making? Actually, since early 70s, when sense-making theory has been developed, this sense-making theory has emphasized the interpersonal processes where individuals use this sense-making to construct their interpretation of real-world events. And social media can be useful because they facilitate these interpersonal processes and make them visible. So social media have the following properties, like they enable making social interaction and make it visible to others. And then they enable local information gathering and make them visible. And they enable back channel communication, so you communicate about an event and as a back channels. And that allows for establishing social norms and supports collective emotional needs, and also make all these processes visible to others. So this makes social media an ideal place for studying collective sense-making. So why this matters? I'm going to make an argument, which is social media provides a lens for observing real reaction in about real events in real time. So keep in mind these three real reaction about real event in real time. So this is why this collective sense-making using social media could be useful in understanding our society. And this collective sense-making using social media has been used in many areas, has been applied in many areas, including healthcare. So you try to understand the health status of a population. And in market segmentation, so you try to understand your customers or your voters. Smart city, you try to understand the behavioral patterns in a city for the citizens in a city. And security, you try to understand the normal or abnormal behavior and disaster management. Okay, so next I will give an overview of about the research themes around collective sense-making using social media. So as we say, social media provide a lens for observing collective activities, and this is so-called crowd activities regarding real-world events. And I will classify the type of research investigation from two angles. What types of research questions were asked, and how were these questions approached? So by crowd, I mean a large number of people who gather together in the same place at the same time. So the research of crowd activities on social media can be classified into three themes: crowd as event sensors, crowd as event predictors, and the crowd dynamics around events. As I will show you, these three themes cover a spectrum from harnessing crowd to understanding crowd. So the first theme number one, crowd as event sensors. So this theme, research theme, utilize Twitter crawl messages to detect or summarize real-world events, and use these Twitter crawl messages to develop tools as part of the early detection systems. So the event could be planned event, like a conference or sports events, or unexpected events, for example, emergencies or disease outbreaks events. And the logic behind this research is to consider Twitter users as diffuse or casual crowds. They act like a large set of distributed sensors that distributed at different places, and these sensors are continuously producing words. These just like sensor readings, and you aggregate, analyze and aggregate these sensor readings for determining the occurrence of an event. So this type of research has been applied in areas like detecting earthquake. This research uses Twitter's geocoded tweets. So when there's an earthquake, people tweet earthquake or quakes or shakes. So they tweet from different places that people experiencing the shakes. So the research have been using these geocoded tweets to develop a real-time earthquake detection system. And research have been showing that earthquake detection system solely based on tweet frequency, they can be faster than seismographic detection with very high accuracy within 2 minutes. So this is faster than seismographic detection. Another area is public health. So people have been using the disease-related terms from tweets, like swine flu, H1N1, or flu. This represents the influenza-like illness. And they use the co-presence of these disease-related terms and other words in tweets, and use them to develop early detection, early warning system for detecting infectious disease outbreak. The second theme number 2, crawl as event predictors. So this research utilizes Twitter crawl activities or opinions to predict the outcome of an event. And this event is expected to happen at a certain time in the future. So most important area for this research is election result prediction. The event will happen certainly, but the outcome is uncertain. So you try to predict the event outcome. And the logic behind this research is to consider prediction just like taking the pulse of the society. And the society is represented by the crowds on Twitter. So of course, the most important research challenge is how to identify the fair samples from these Twitter crowds. So this research, as I mentioned, it has been used in 2 major topics. The first is opinion poll extraction. So these researchers try to use Twitter data to substitute for traditional polls. So for example, O'Connor has shown that there's high correlation between the sentiment trends extracted from tweeters with the consumer confidence indicators of political opinion. And the second topic, the most important topic, is the election outcome prediction. And this research has been done by sampling the political opinions from the crowd's tweets. And they try to predict the election outcome by identifying fair samples from the tweet crowds. Okay, so the third theme number 3, crowd dynamics around events. So this research is different, much different from the previous 2 themes. which is harnessing the crowd. So this theme try to understand the crowd. The research tried to study what people do and feel before, during, and after an event, and how people's behavior change and how their feelings change over the event period. So in other words, they try to understand the impact of an event on the society. So the rationale is that they consider Twitter users as expressive crowd, and they gather together on social media to express their emotions, their opinions in response to the event. They cheer, comfort, or show support to each other in response to an event happening in real world. So the events could be disaster events or other major events in the society. So there has been major topics in this research theme, like behavior, response, and change. And the research tried to characterize the behavior change in response to external events. Like my own research, we have shown how individual and collective patterns of Twitter users' behavior change during events like political events or disaster events. And another research topics focusing on coordinations, understanding the coordinations in social and political movement. During the protests like Arab Spring or Occupy Wall Street, there have been a lot of activists using Twitter with hashtag to coordinate their actions and garner support. For example, Conover has shown that they use tweets related to Occupy Wall Street to study the geographical patterns of these activists' communication structure. Okay, so in summary, these three themes can be understood in terms of the research question, what questions were asked in this research, and their analytical characteristics, meaning how the questions were approached and what the research challenges are. So, for example, the first theme, crowd as event sensors, the question could be how Twitter users' message can be used to identify or summarize the events. The second theme, the question includes how Twitter users' activities or opinions can be used to predict event outcome accurately or to reflect the public or community opinion. And the third theme, the question would look like how do Twitter users act and interact during the event of interest, and how do Twitter users' behavior change during and after the events. And the analytical characteristic in the first theme includes gathering relevant event signal through proper tweet collection. This includes proper sampling, denoising, and utilize the pre-selected event lexicon. And you have to detect event occurrences using, for example, temporal analysis, spatial temporal modeling, outlier detection. And you will generate event summary using sentiment analysis, topic modeling, and the assessment of credible sources. The second theme, the analytical characteristics, including to gather relevant messages using pre-selected concept lexicon, and the sample users to represent offline actors based on the user attribute, because the goal is not just to analyze the Twitter users' behavior, but to predict the outcome of a real-world event. And to do so, you have to measure user opinions using sentiment analysis, temporal analysis, and to generate predictions by predictive modeling with respect to different outcome type. For example, binary outcomes, win or lose, multi-class outcome, or numeric outcomes. And the third thing, you want to identify or sample users participating in these events. And to understand their behavioral change, you have to measure user behavior using sentiment analysis or social network analysis, and to develop or test theories using temporal analysis and hypothesis testing, because the goal is to understand your population, your crowd. Okay, so next I will give examples to exemplify the research in each of these research themes. So first, I will use my own research as example studies for the third theme, crowd dynamics around events. I'm interested in understanding the crowd dynamics during media events. So media events like political debates, people often dual screen the events. By dual screen, I mean people watch the TV that broadcasting the events, and at the same time, they tweet about the events to communicate what they learn and what they pay attention about the events. So, for example, in the last political debates in 2012, it has been shown that over 11% of the debate watcher dual screen the debates. And the research question would be that I'm interested is what is the structure of people's shared attention during media events. For example, who dominate the conversation and who has the influential impacts during the media events. And another study focus is on crowd dynamics across disaster, following disaster. According to a recent survey, during the disaster, a lot of people have been using social media to update their status. Over 40% of citizens use social media to update their status, to show support to the victims, and to express their feelings and their emotions about the disasters. So the question that I'm interested in is, how do people share emotion during the disaster events? And use this question as a proxy to understand the impact of the disaster on our society. So the research challenges, crowd data is big and noisy. So you have to denoise the data. But the research challenge is beyond denoising the data. There has been much work on denoising the data. And the most important challenge is to identify the representative slice from the data, which usually comes in the form of stream, social media stream. Because the goal is to make an argument about people's behavioral change. So to answer the research question, we have proposed a quasi-nature experiment design called computational focus group. So here's the idea. The social media in aggregation were produced from diffuse crowd. And there will be a lot of people saying different things at different times. So to understand the behavior change, the idea of computational focus group is to utilize the external events as different treatment or level of exposure. And then we infer relevant users to create panels prospectively or retrospectively to track their behavior before or after events. So you identify users to create panels based on users' attribute. The attribute could be collected or could be inferred. So first, I'll talk about the study of crowd dynamics around media events. So during media events, we consider Twitter as a public sphere. So when people communicate in this public sphere, will this place look more like a hierarchical structure, which we call rising star, where few people dominate the communication? Or will the public sphere look more like has a flag structure where everyone can have a voice in the public sphere? And we call this structure rising star. So the question that I'm asking is the structure of the sharing attention during media event closer to rising star or rising tide? So to understand this question, we have collect and track the political active users from Twitters with different event exposure during the election debates. And we create different conditions, and then the findings that in this study, we show that while users across the system become more active, so during the media events, people become more active. But this additional activity actually reflect concentrated attention to few users and topics. So in this, so I just briefly summarize the research design in this study. So we track these political active users from Twitters. We collect these over 200,000 users and collect the historic data over a period of time, and then we utilize these different event period to construct 4 conditions from the pre-event period to breaking news period to the conventional event period, DNC, RNC conventional event period, and the debate events. So utilizing these different events and event condition, we create a different level of exposure. So then we can test the hypothesis. And the key result from this study, utilizing these 4 conditions, is first, we show there's a change in communication. So people's tweet volume increase with more shared attention, and their retweet ratio increase and reply ratio decrease. So during the media events, there have been more broadcasting and less interpersonal communication. And then there's also a change in adoption rate. So during the event, people's reply lag decrease from 25 minutes to less than 15 minutes. And the retweets to other people's tweets also, the lag also decrease to about 10 minutes. So we show users become more active and receptive. And then there's also a change in concentration. So more people retweet and reply to others, but there have been less people receive these retweet and reply. So about 75 of these retweet and replies goes to top 25% of users and hashtag and topics. And we have utilized similar research design to understand the loyalty of sports fans. So the question, this time we ask, do sports fans become happier when the team wins? And for this, we utilize the 32 football teams to create user panels and use the win-lose to create the exposure. And we show that the fans, they are not happier when the team wins. They express increased anger and anxiety when the game's going on, and their negative emotion continue to increase when the team loses the game. Okay, another topic that we focus on is to understand the disaster response. So in recent years, we have been witnessing a lot of mass violence in our society. Boston bombing occurred in 2014, and at that time I was in Boston, so I was experiencing this mass violence in Boston. And during the time, we continuously watch the TV broadcasting and watching how Twitter users has been experiencing the events. So I create this video using the geocoded tweets. And this shows, can I show the video? So this shows how the emotional tweets distribute over the space and time. So you can see this emotional, the red dots shows the tweet location, and these tweets contains emotion expression like fear, shockness, and you can see immediately after the bombing, there has been a surge in the geocoded tweets over the space. So this trace the marathon path trail in Boston. So there has been a lot of fear over the space during the time. And if you look at the time series of the fear, you can see these fears echoes together with the Boston citizens' emotion. So we can observe the fear, the spikes is now only observable in Boston, but also in other cities like New York, Chicago, and also San Francisco. So the question that I'm interested is, which communities outside of Boston express the most fear in the wake of Boston bombing, and what factors best explain the different levels of fears? So the research design is to utilize a prediction framework to examine different factors like geographic factors, social connections, and personal experience. And we use data, we create measures within 2 weeks prior to the event to predict what happened after the event, to examine which factors are most predictable to predict the outcome of the fear expression. And in this study, we show that the synchronous expression of fear are associated with all these different factors like geo-proximity, social ties, and personal visit. And personal visits is the most dominant factors to explain the fear expression. And also, fear has a productive role in social support. So the outcome variable is constructed using the shared fear. By shared fear, we compute the temporal correlation of the fear during the bombings. So how similar the fear in Boston with other cities, like the fear in New York, the fear in Washington, and the fear in Chicago. The key results, we show that to explain sheer fear, personal visit has the strongest and significant effect. And here, visit, we mean the number of travels to the focal area, because we track the historic users' data, so we know how many times they travel to Boston based on their geocoded tweets. And another key result is we show fear is significantly associated with solidarity. When people give support, solidarity, send solidarity to the Boston citizens, but not comfort. Like comfort is identified by expression like a prayer for Boston. And this means cities with more shared fear tend to show more solidarity. In a recent study about Paris attack, we ask another question: what factors best explain the lingering negative emotion after the terrorist attack? And we show that users' emotion shift gradually and return to pre-impact status over days to weeks. And the media exposure has a significant impact on the recovery process. So in the last part, I'm going to showcase some applications for event understanding and event detection, because next session, Yuheng will give the technique, will introduce the technique for event understanding and event detection. So I'm going to give application first. And here I'm going to review some representative studies in these research areas. So first, the event understanding has been used to understand the breaking news. So in this study, Petrovic and his colleague has examined whether or how Twitter can replace traditional news reporting in covering breaking news. So the question asked is, can Twitter replace Newswire for breaking news? And the result, they show Twitter's broadcasting is not faster, but they can bring more event coverage, especially cover minor events. So these are some details for the events. They collect the news wire data and tweet stream in 77 days. And in this period, they contain 27 major manually identified events and also automatically identified events. So these events are including the celebrity news, accidents, natural disaster, and science discovery. They also use automatic discovery to discover potential events, to generate a potential event set. And then use Twitter and the collection of news article. They create the pair of news events by computing the pairwise similarity between the clustering of these two streams. And the key results they show is that Twitter has good coverage of newswire events, and Twitter also have wider coverage for minor events. For example, the sports-related events, hyperlocal events, and rumor debunking. For example, there has been minor acts of vandalism during the London riots, and the low enforcement authority have used Twitter to debunk rumors during the riots. And they show neither streams leads the news, the breaking news. Twitter is not faster than mainstream news when dealing with these major events. But for minor events, Twitter can lead. Twitter can be faster or cover more than the mainstream news. There are some types of events that especially Twitter works better. For example, the sports events or disaster-related events. The second study used Twitter to examine how how Twitter can help discover the structure of media or broadcasting events. So this study first given by Sharma. So they ask, can the Twitter timeline reveal the structure of broadcasting events? And they showed this Twitter message can be useful, especially in segmenting and annotating the media. And they can also help discovering the topics and show real-time feedback. So these are the key results. They can utilize the Twitter message to generate the table of content for the TV broadcasting. And they generate this table of content automatically by examining the tweet volume. And they use the tweet volume to segment the media content. And this table of content can show the key terms from the Twitter message, and from Twitter message and the closed captioning. And also, they can use this Twitter message to develop metrics based on these usage cues and the content cues. The usage cues including the rate where users are sending messages and how long these messages are and how conversational these messages are. Conversational means reply and retweets. And the content cues can be based on the term scoring like a TF, IDF. Okay, for detecting events, the most important study is introduced by Shakaki in 2010. They use tweets to detect target events like earthquake and estimate the centers of these events, like the epicenter of the earthquake and the trajectory of weather events like typhoons. So they have shown that the detection of earthquake can have very high accuracy, and based on this, they can send notification much faster than the government announcement. Also, event detection has been used to summarize the sports event. So Nikos used tweets to generate a journalist summary of sports events like World Cup soccer matches. And they show they can identify important moments like a goal, red card, yellow card, through detecting spikes in the tweet volume per minute. And they show reasonable, good, high accuracy based on the precision and recall. And they can also utilize the message to generate summary by scoring the input sentence. The last representative study is introduced by Yuheng, and he has been showing Twitter can be used to automatically extract and summarize hyperlocal information about events, topic, and people and places. Hyperlocal information means the news, people, and events that set within a particular locality, and this is of the particular interest of the residents. And he showed that using Twitter message, they can develop a interface which they call Wooly, and this provides really good real-time summary of events, topics, and places and people in the neighborhood. So this concludes the first part, and the slides are available at this URL. And the next session will be given by Yuheng, and he will be talking about the methods and the recent development in technique and research challenges, especially for event understanding and event detection. So, okay, so thank you. Any question for so far?